Now, me and Jay have already had kind of a conversation on the group some couple of months back on some of the issues which relate to what we are going to discuss today. But I think the main agenda for the discussion of this lecture, I don't think it should take more than 40-45 minutes for the session today, because the judgment was fairly simple, with some facts which may have to be seen in detail. But other than that, uh, the points of law which were reiterated were are fairly settled points of law. And then probably in the second half, we can also discuss as to what is the exact change which has happened after the amendment has come in, and whether the specific relief under the amended act is now not a discretionary relief, and whether or not it is not a discretionary relief anymore, or whether it still continues to be a discretionary relief, because obviously the amended act has been drafted in a way in which it shows that a huge amount of discretion has been taken away from the courts in granting specific performance. But to what extent will they actually be taken away in practice is something which we as practitioners can discuss. And since Bharat, had proposed this judgment, Bharat, you please feel free to come in wherever you want. I just quickly intend to talk about the facts for 5 to 10 minutes, and so that I can lay the base along with the facts and the propositions, and then it can be an open discussion with everyone giving their inputs. Madhvi is there, Amit is there, Jay is there, Pallavi is there,
And Chirag is also there.
and Chirag is there. So all experienced counsels, except Chirag, I believe Chirag is still in early days. So all of us can share with each other whatever we think about the propositions. So I will just like to talk about 4 or 5 important dates, and then straight away come to the ratio of this Supreme Court judgment. This is a case where one particular property partially has been sold twice. So on 30th September in 1982, the vendor had sold 100 yards through an oral agreement, and also gave possession of the same to one Pratap Reddy. The total consideration was 3,000, out of which 2,500 was paid as advance by Pratap Reddy. Now, on 30th September 1982, there was a registered sale deed. It was an oral agreement, but coupled with the possession, as per the facts of the case, of 100 yards. Now, on 20th January 1984, this oral agreement was reduced into a written agreement between Pratap Reddy and the vendor, and it was agreed that rupees 500, which is the balance out of the total amount of 3,000, will be paid by Pratap Reddy to the vendor. So, till 20th January 1984, on 20th January 1984, the agreement to sell was reduced in writing. Now comes the second half, where the vendor allegedly goes and sells this property to another third party, and the third party will be called as Wendy by me, because in the entire judgment the third party has been called as Wendy. So the vendor and D. Sarla, who is the Wendy, entered into an agreement for sale for 300 yards, which I believe is the entire dimension of the suit property, measurement of the suit property, for the total consideration of 75,000, out of which 40,000 was paid by the vendor to the Wendy in advance. So on 21st March 1984, the vendor has received 40,000 from D. Sarla and has committed to transfer the possession and sell the entire property of 300 yards, even though when 100 yards was allegedly already sold by him to Pratap Reddy through an agreement to sell. Obviously, in both these cases, the sale deed has not been registered, and we are only talking in terms of agreement to sell till now. There was one important stipulation which came in the agreement to sell dated 21 March 1984, and that stipulation is on page 3 of the judgment, paragraph 6. And I would not screen share, but everyone can refer to the judgment. I'm sure everyone has it. Uh, just 1 second. Yeah, everyone has it. So, you know, para 6 of the judgment clearly says that the vendor has alleged that she specifically requested the vendee to incorporate a clause with regard to the earlier agreement with Pratap Reddy in the sale agreement between the vendor and the vendee. However, the vendee assured the vendor that she would get the earlier agreement with Pratap Reddy cancelled, as her husband knew Pratap Reddy well and had already spoken to Pratap Reddy. According to the vendor, the vendee represented to the vendor that there was no need for the vendor to get any clearance from Pratap Reddy, as the vendee and her husband had been assured by Pratap Reddy that no difficulty would be created by her. So this stipulation is a stipulation on which vendor relies later on during the course of the arguments. Basically, what the vendor is saying that, listen, I understand I have sold 100 yards of this particular property, but now I want to sell the entire 300 yards, including those 100 yards, to someone else. And this someone else, who's D. Sarna in this case, is clearly, agreeing to the fact that she will get it all settled with Pratap Reddy, and Pratap Reddy will not create a problem insofar as the 100 square yards of the portion which was sold to Pratap Reddy or agreed to be sold to Pratap Reddy through the agreement to sell. Now, obviously, this is only an oral assertion. This does not find a record in the agreement dated 21 March 1984. This is something which is by way of an oral assertion by the vendor before the court. Now, 25th May 1984, the 100 yards were registered in favor of Pratap Reddy through a registered sale deed. So this is important because it will be important for us to highlight that the first sale deed was that of Pratap Reddy, was that in favor of Pratap Reddy and not D. Sarla. So to that extent, the right of Pratap Reddy would trump the right of D. Sarla because of a sale deed which was registered prior in time. Now, the next important date is 1984 August, where vendee filed a suit for specific performance of the agreement to sell and saying that, please give me possession. And because, a major part of the consideration has been taken from me, that is 40,000 out of the 75,000. Therefore, convey the 300 square yards and give me the possession for the same. Now, this was the suit for specific performance, which ultimately came to be decreed by the trial court. The High Court also upheld the decree, and so did the Supreme Court. So we have concurrent findings at all three stages of the appellate procedure. There was another suit which was filed by Pratap Reddy, seeking permanent injunction restraining the vendee from interfering with his possession over the 100 yards of the suit. In the suit, Pratap Reddy had said that he was not even aware of the agreement to sell dated 21 March 1984. So what is happening is that Pratap Reddy is saying that, D. Sarla was lying to the vendor. D. Sarla never made any arrangements with me, never, they took a consent from me. And therefore, my 100 yards can't be disturbed.
Roshan, Shomindu is there. He wants to join in. If you can
sorry. Okay. So, to that extent, just 1 second, sir. Yeah, so basically, Pratap Reddy filed another suit seeking permanent injunction restraining vendee from interfering with his possession over the 100 yards of the suit property. These were basically the facts. So what we are looking at is a suit for specific performance filed by D. Sarla, saying that I've given 40,000. Now you please execute the sale deed in my favor. Whereas, as we all know, the truth of the matter is that 100 square yards have already been conveyed through a registered sale deed. Just 1 second, I have a message. Just 1 second. Yeah. So now the ratio, directly coming to the ratio of, and I am not going to deal with the arguments of both sides because I believe we can utilize that time better by discussing the broader principles on which Specific Relief Act will be premised, the amended Specific Relief Act. And the operative portion of the judgment is para 59 and para 60, which is on page 21 of the judgment. It says, it is well settled that the onus of proof lies on the party who makes an allegation. It was for the vendor to establish that the agreement dated 21 March 1984 was subject to the condition as alleged by the vendor, that the vendee and or her husband would negotiate with Pratap Reddy to get his earlier agreement with the vendor cancelled. The vendor failed to discharge their onus of proving that there was such a condition in the agreement dated 21 March 1984. The trial court and the High Court rightly did not believe the vendor. The effective concurrent finding of the High Court and the trial court that the vendee had been ready and willing to perform and had in fact performed their obligations under the agreement is also unexceptionable for the following reasons. And then the court lays down 5 important reasons. First reason, as observed above, the vendee paid rupees 40,000 out of the total sale consideration of 75,000 on the date of execution of the agreement dated 21 March 1984 itself. So we will realize that in suits for specific performance, if a good amount of, a healthy amount of money has been transferred by the buyer to the seller, then the law in a way tilts in favor of the buyer, because the court also understands that time is not of essence in such cases, and that is also covered in point 5 of the statement of this paragraph. And because a large amount of money has been transferred, therefore, delay in paying the balance amount should not be held to be fatal. Now, point number 2 was, it is not disputed that the vendee paid a further sum of 5,000 to the vendor's husband against a receipt. Third was, it is the vendor's own case that in terms of agreement dated 21 March 1984, the full consideration was to be paid within 45 days. The vendee's claim that she tendered rupees 30,000 on 30th April 1984 was not disputed by the vendor in her legal notice letter dated 20 June 1984. In any case, the vendee obtained demand draft for rupees 30,000 dated 4th May 1984 in favor of the vendor towards balance sale consideration within 47 days from the execution of the agreement dated 21 March 1984. So obviously the court has gone into the conduct of the vendee in this case, which is the buyer, and the court, on the basis of seeing the conduct of the buyer, has clearly come to a conclusion that the bona fide is there. The vendee or the buyer, right throughout the course of the transaction, was willing to give the money. It was only the vendor who was not taking it. And because it was only the vendor who was not taking it, therefore vendee cannot be faulted. Now, I have 2 questions which I want to, because I see that, Amit is also here and Jay is also here. Both have, I believe, worked a lot on specific performance. The fact that there was a sale deal to the extent of 100 square yards in favor of Pratap Reddy, that's all right. There was a prior sale deed, there is no doubt about that. And the court also justifies it by saying that, the vendee was only charged for the balance 200 square yards, not for the entire 300 square yards. Therefore, it's fair towards vendee. But from the side of the vendee, wasn't vendee justified to ask for the entire 300 square yards, especially when all the courts are admittedly on the same conclusion that the vendee all throughout was ready and willing, and the vendee had shown more than his or her bona fides in this case. So, in that case, to what extent has the vendee been vindicated, or what extent has the stand of vendee been vindicated under law, where she is claiming 300 square yards? So, this is something which we can come on in about 5 minutes when we open the discussion. Now, the last point which the court notes is, it is well settled that time is not of essence to agreements for sale of immovable property, unless the agreement specifically and expressly incorporates the consequence of cancellation of the agreement upon failure to comply at terms within the stipulated date. So we all know that time is not of essence in regards to agreements for sale of immovable properties. So that, I believe, was the important ratio. Now, paragraph 70 deals with the amendment, and paragraph 70 says that after the amendment of section 10 of the Specific Relief Act, the word specific performance of any contract may, in the discretion of the court, be enforced have been substituted with the word specific performance of a contract shall be enforced subject to dash dash dash. The court is now obliged to enforce the specific performance of a contract subject to the provisions of 11 to 14 and 16 of the SRA. Relief on specific performance of a contract is no longer discretionary after the amendment. Now, my question is, isn't it still discretionary? What factors are to be seen under the new or under the amended Specific Relief Act for granting a specific performance decree? So I think those are the facts, those are the main issues. COA, the amended Specific Relief Act, which is the main mandate of the discussion today. And on that note, I can open the floor. I think Bharat can come in now.
Yeah.
And
Hi, Roshan.
Yeah.
See, Roshan, as far as the new amended act is concerned, see, it came in October 2018, right? So I'm not very sure if you would find a judgment based on the new act where a specific performance filed after 2018 has been granted or denied. So we will have our limited resources on that point. But see, as far as this Supreme Court judgment is concerned and the other judgment is concerned, one thing which I want to say on this is that specific relief, to my mind and knowledge, has always been discretionary prior to 2018, right? Prior to amendment. So I have more resources and material to talk about the law as it was for the cases prior to the amendment. So I would like to speak on that. As far as the after amendment is concerned, all of us can examine that in our own wisdom in the discussion to see whether this law will now, how it will be taken up by the courts in future, right?
Sure, sounds good.
So I would like to straight away refer to the para 67 of the Supreme Court judgment. So you see, that's the most important para which differentiates the old act from the new act. So I'll read it. It says the relief of specific performance of an agreement was at all material times equitable, discretionary relief governed by the provisions of the Specific Relief Act 1963, herein referred as SRA. Even though the power of the court to direct specific performance of an agreement may be discretionary, such power could not be arbitrary. The discretion had to be necessarily to be exercised in accordance with sound and reasonable judicial principles. So see, this paragraph straight away says that earlier the word used in section 10 was the specific performance of any contract may in the discretion. So now in the new act, this may has been replaced with shall. So, but how this shall will be read by the courts is only when any suit is filed after 2018 for a default made, right? So I have not come across any judgment as of now which has dealt with this shall. So I will be concentrating on the may part because see, most of the litigations as of now would be pertaining to transactions prior to 2018 only and suit filed prior to 2018 only, right? So in this regard, see, as far as your question, Roshan, that why relief for 100 square yard was not granted, the court has clearly said that the suit of the vendee for 100 square yard for declaration is barred by limitation. The vendee was aware in 1984 itself that there is a sale deed. Since still he chose not to implead Pratap Reddy and not seek a declaration.
Correct.
And even in the suit for specific performance, right, he did not implead Pratap Reddy. He was only impleaded after 12 years or 14 years. So see, a good right has been conveyed in favor of the Pratap Reddy, and he has been enjoying his property since 1984 to 1998 when he was impleaded. So there was no question of disturbing his possession and his title, because and see, this is a case. We are not going into the fact there are many cases in which 14 years, many hands would have changed in the property, right? We are not sure whether Pratap Reddy sold this property in 1998 or not, but even otherwise, if let's say someone who is not impleaded up as a party and has acquired a right, in 14 years, property would have been sold to many people. So that proposition.
Yeah, so basically, you're right, Bharat. So basically the answer is that you need to sue for declaration. And you can't sue for specific performance. To the extent that the property has already been conveyed through a registered sale deed, specific performance cannot be the remedy. The specific performance can only be the remedy for the balance 200 yards.
Balance, yes. For the other part, he filed a suit for declaration.
Right.
Yeah. So now what I want to say is that, look, as of now, the law which is prior to the amendment, which makes this relief discretionary, most of the time court examines readiness and willingness of the buyer. See, the readiness and willingness of the buyer is generally reflected through his bank balance, that what is the sale consideration and whether he was ready with that money or not. So first part of the specific performance is readiness, which can be established by the money, that whether he was ready with that money, can he prove his financial stability for the transaction. Second, the second most discretionary part is willingness, that how do you prove your willingness. So most of the cases, and now for that we will read Justice Rohinton judgments also, courts see the conduct of the buyer to find out his willingness, whether he was actually willing to perform or not. So see, one small criteria generally which is being looked by the court to see is the time taken by the buyer to approach court. See, if you will see the line of the judgments, I'll share the compilation. Most of the suits for specific performance have been dismissed only on the ground that buyer approached the court, let's say at the fag moment, at the end of the 3 years of the limitation, which, you know, which courts generally say that if he was so interested or if he was so willing, then why did he approach the court at the last moment? So this is the factor which court generally looks into, see the willingness in most of the judgments. In fact, there is one judgment of Justice Valmiki J. Mehta, which has been upheld by the division bench also, which says that to see readiness, right, the sale consideration, if someone has paid more than 55% or 60%, they have mentioned it in percentage there, then it will show that a more than consideration has been paid to the other side. Then his willingness has +1 there, because it is.
But it will be useful if you can share that judgment of the group.
Yes, I'll share that because I'm doing.
Because you're doing a very good kind of analysis when you are dealing with readiness and willingness. Distinctly, and both have their own certain set of factors. So yeah, that's important. Yeah.
See, because if you will see for the willingness, generally judge says that what steps did you take? Did you write to him? What did you do? See, basically, just because my seller is in breach, I cannot wait for 3 years to approach court. So that's one of the criteria. See, when this discretion has been generally exercised, it's a balanced approach of seeing what was the position of the buyer and seller. See, the worst part about specific performance of immovable is the change in market rates. Because when you enter into the agreement to sell, when you file the suit, and when the suit is finally decreed, the property prices generally multiply from 5 to 15 times. So the court have to be very cautious while granting the specific performance, that whether any injury will be caused to the seller also in this case. Let's say in this case, if the balance consideration was very minimal, only 5,000 out of 50,000, 45,000 was only paid. Let's say if the sale transaction was for, let's say, 1 lakh, and the buyer had only paid 30,000, and if the suit is decreed after 10 years, you just can't pay the remaining, sale consideration. You will have to balance the equities, that what is buyer getting, what is seller getting after 10 years, because 70,000 for a property, 200 square yard property, will be nothing after 10 years. So first point generally which court ensures in such cases is that the plaintiff deposits the entire money before court, so that the defendant always has a discretion to not litigate and withdraw that money and settle that, so that if I have to invest that money, I can invest somewhere. So now, Roshan.
Yeah, I think that's a good analysis, Bharat. I think the judgment has been fairly well dissected by you and me. Should we now open the discussion for what the amendments have been like?
Yeah, we can. And see,
if you have any other point, please feel free to add.
I just have one point. Justice Rohinton's judgment, Justice Nariman's judgment, which I had sent in the group. See, it's a 2019 judgment, and honestly, when I read this judgment, it appears it's a July 10, 2019 judgment, which I had shared. It's called R. Lakshmi Nathan versus Devaraja, Civil Appeal 2420 of 2018. So in this judgment, when Justice Nariman says that even if you have approached the court at the fag end, it should not be read against you. So I'll read the interesting part of the judgment, which is the main part. So it's para, it's running page 7 of the judgment. It's a long para. I'll read the relevant part. It says that in India, it is well settled that rule of equity that exists in England does not apply, and so long as a suit for specific performance is filed within the period of limitation, delay cannot be put against the plaintiff. So when he says that, he actually upsets a lot of findings of various district courts and high courts by saying that even if I have approached the court on the last day of the limitation, I am entitled to specific performance. So what Justice Rohinton is trying to suggest from this judgment, Justice Nariman is trying to suggest is that if you have money, without looking into your willingness or conduct, and if you file a suit within 3 years, it has to be decreed. That's my interpretation of the judgment. And this 2019 judgment, according to me, is different from the rest, all the line of judgments which had been prevailing in specific relief, especially our own High Court, wherein it said, no, your conduct is not right. You have approached at the fag end, or the prices of the property have now increased multifold. So if this judgment actually, according to me, takes that discretionary part and says that if he has the money and he has come to the court, then there is no question of equity. Equity, he says, only exists in England and not under the Indian law. In Indian law, you have to decree specific performance. So that's what I have to say, that many people may be in a position to use this judgment if they are for the plaintiff and suit has been filed belatedly, just to show their conduct, that conduct will not matter.
Yeah, that is interesting. So basically, last day of 3 years, because I believe 3 years is the limitation period from the date of cause of action. And Justice Nariman says, but obviously every case will depend on its facts and circumstances, and Justice Nariman's decision will be applied accordingly. But that's helpful, Bharat. So now I think we can discuss as to what are the changes which have been brought out in the amended act, and how exactly these cases will be dealt differently by way of the Amendment Act. Anyone else is now free to come in to make any points with regard to the discussion that we've had, or with regard to how the Amended Act is going to play and how the amendments will be played there. Jay, you want to come in and help us?
Yeah, I realized my mic was on mute. I was speaking and with Zoom, the usual things. One thing I wanted to say, hi everyone again, this is Jay here. With regard to what Bharat said, you see, I tend to agree on the point that the best way to show readiness and willingness would be to tender or to at least deposit that money in court. But a practical problem that is faced in the litigation is that clients say that, look, you yourself are saying that there are more specific performance cases which are dismissed than allowed. And the litigation is to go on, and there is that line of judgments that says that readiness and willingness has to be up till the date of decree. So the issue that arises is that if a deposit is made of an amount, whether the property value changes, doesn't change, that aside for the moment, we don't know how long that process can take in our particular court system. You see, in most of the cases that I have done for specific relief, I have not seen parties paying more than 5, 10, 15, 20%. I rarely see a case which comes across as 50, 55, 60%. There I find that the point that I'm trying to make is that there is a lot of discretion vested in the courts to each case on what they should allow and what they should not allow. The Amendment Act tries to do away with some of that discretion by saying that in these cases, specific performance has to be granted or does not have to be granted. But I do feel that that discretion plays a very big role in this particular litigation. You see, there is a 1965 Supreme Court judgment, and I can share it if required. Very nice judgment which says that if the period of limitation, just from what Roshan, you were also saying just now, if the period of limitation is 3 years, then whether you approach on the first day or the last day, it is irrelevant. As long as you approach within the 3 years, you are inside limitation. It cannot be held against you that you approached on the last day. But that is not in the case of specific performance.
Correct. I was just about to say that would have been in a different context.
That is, no doubt about it. But the fact is that discretion over here is so wide to courts that I find the Amendment Act very helpful or instructive in that aspect by removing small technicalities, like for instance the requirement to plead readiness and willingness. It straight away now says you prove readiness and willingness. I find that discretion that is vested in the court to remove that, to not remove but to restrict that to some extent, the Amendment Act is good. It's instructive in that regard. And I think that this and other judgments, again, like Bharat said, there's no recent judgment applying the Amendment Act in litigation. But I think that is what is to come in the future, that it has to be a more straitjacket formula than allowing judge to judge. Because, you were mentioning Justice Mehta. He's one of my favorite judges from the Delhi High Court, but he was notoriously known as not allowing a single specific performance suit ever. And in the one or two cases that he has allowed, you can do a research on his judgments. In the one or two cases that he has allowed, I think were cases where payments were 70-80% had been made. And I say this with some sense because I did a research on this, because my cases were coming up before him. And I wanted to cite some law on this aspect before him. And somebody told me that, he usually doesn't allow specific performance. And I started doing a search judge-wise. So what I'm trying to...
Mehta used to very liberally grant interest along with the refund to the buyer.
He would ask you on the first date. He would tell you that, look, I will give you your money back. I will give you whatever interest you want, but you don't pursue this. But if you pursued it, then he would dictate a long judgment there and then in court. So I do feel that discretion has to be exercised a little in a restricted manner by the courts.
Right, great. Thanks for the inputs there. And those statistics are also fairly interesting with regard to Justice Mehta. I mean, at least I was not aware of it.
Point.
Yeah, Bharat, please. Yeah.
So Jay, the judgment which you are referring to of 65 Supreme Court, that's Yellowji Rao. It's being recreated by Justice Nariman also in the judgment which I am referring, which says that 3 years is the limitation, and if someone approaches in 3 years, then you cannot dismiss it. Then there is no question.
But you see, the only thing is that, Bharat, Justice Nariman is juxtaposing his judgment to a different context, because from what I understand, this judgment, 1965 judgment, is not in the context of a specific performance. And you see, when the entire ballgame of a specific performance comes in, then the delay, even though it has happened within the limitation period, the delay is a factor which is important to be considered. So to that extent, you were also saying that Justice Nariman may have gone wrong in ignoring all these precedents.
Yes, exactly. So now, in fact, in one of my matters, this judgment has been troubling because we are for the defendant and we have been saying that the conduct of plaintiff is not right. But now other side has produced this judgment to say, no, even if I have come to the court on the last date, you have to actually decree my suit basis on this judgment. So now another question, Roshan, which will be important is that now this new act has come on 1st October 2018. Let's say we'll have to see if my agreement is prior to 2018 and there's a dispute. And if I file after this amendment, will I be covered under the new act or I'll be covered under the old act? Whether it will be from the date of filing.
No, but the point is that this is from my understanding, this is not a procedural change, it's a substantive amendment, and therefore it will not have retrospective application.
No, I'm saying, let's say that you and I enter into a transaction, property transaction. I have a proposed date which is 15th of September 2017. Right? 15th September 2017. You commit a default by not executing a sale deed on, let's say, 15th October 2017. Right? So now I have 3 years to file suit. I can file suit today also. Right? Irrespective whether you have sold that property or not. Right? So if I file it today, though our agreement is of 2017, but the suit is filed in 2020, will I be filing it under the new act? I just wanted
to... my understanding would be that, no, I got your point. My understanding would be that the cause of action took place when the unamended Specific Relief Act was existing, and therefore the provisions of the unamended Specific Relief Act will apply. But I might be wrong. I don't know if anyone else has any comment. Because, clearly it's a substantive amendment. It can't be given retrospective effect. And the cause of action arose when the unamended Specific Relief Act was in place.
Just a small point here, Roshan. I absolutely agree with you on the fact that it's a substantive amendment. But according to me, it will depend on the day that the case is filed, not the date on which the agreement is executed. The simple reason for that is that the entire act is geared towards how the litigation starts and goes on. The act, in fact, doesn't make any difference in the act whether the agreement was prior to 2018 or after. So according to me,
I think that makes sense. I think you're right.
Yeah,
in the
that's what
example
I
that,
wanted to check with everyone, because I am also of the same opinion with Jay is saying that if I even file in 2020 for a transaction of 2017, as long as I am in limitation, I think I should be permitted to take advantage of that.
it should be right, because you see, builders have already started taking advantage in as a defense to say that there can be no stay on infrastructure projects, despite the fact that the agreement for that would have been before.
Right.
So I think the same logic would apply.
No, I think that makes sense. You're right. The entire thrust is on the litigation.
Roshan, I have one more question for the group. You know, which troubles me in most of my cases in the specific performance. Let's say you have decided to sell a property to me, right? Now, there's a dispute between you and me. Fortunately, unfortunately, the period of limitation for you to approach, for either of us to approach the court is 3 years, right? Now, if within this period, a third party right is created, right? But you have also approached the court, and now you obviously, once you file a suit, I will come with a defense that I've already sold the property, right? And then the third, and you will disclose the details, and then the other side will add the third party. So the fate of the third party actually gets disturbed because of this long duration of 3 years. So I just wanted to check.
But in this case, please understand, Bharat. As you only pointed out correctly, that once a registered sale deed takes place.
Yes.
Because I believe by third party rights created, you mean registered sale deed has taken place in favor of someone else, right?
Right.
Other than you.
Right.
So clearly, his right will trump over your right.
No. What I am trying to say is that, Roshan, you had a valid agreement with me.
Right.
And delay will be not held against me in filing the
I am the seller, right? You're saying I am the seller.
You are the seller.
Right.
When I file a suit against you within 3 years, you tell me that, Bharat, I have sold property to Jay, right? So my 3 years to challenge that registered sale deed start from my date of knowledge, right? When you have informed me either by way of some notice or in your written statement. Now I implead Jay. Now my agreement is valid. I am entitled to a specific performance. Even if Jay claims that he is a bona fide purchaser, what happens to him in that case? Again, that's a discretionary relief. Because, see,
that's the entire point. No, Bharat. Then your remedy for, I don't know. This is interesting what you're saying, but from what I understand, if there is a registered sale deed in favor of Jay, then your rights at best can be for refund along with interest.
No, sorry, you cheated me, right, by selling it to Jay. You look at this.
No, registered sale deed, no, in your favor.
It's okay, but I had an agreement.
Jay, please come in.
Jay, please come in.
Sorry, just a small point here. On just again on a technical basis, you cannot, subject to correction, you cannot implead any third party in a specific relief suit. The relief that would be available to you then would be to either withdraw the suit against Roshan.
That's what I was saying. No,
you file declaration cancellation against the third party because you're not a party. So you will seek cancellation, and then if you want, you can, if the court permits, you can get damages from Roshan.
Correct. That's what I was saying, Bharat. You can't get a degree of specific performance in that case. But another thing, this is one very interesting thing that you've raised, and because you've raised that, I'll just quickly say, you said that because Bharat is not a party to that sale deed, therefore he will seek for cancellation. Now, I was also under this impression that, he can only seek for cancellation. But then I came across some judgments which say that there is no difference between a suit for declaration or a suit for cancellation. It's only terminology. Now, I understand the court fee implication is different between the two. There is a implication of court fee as well. But, I am again not very clear because there are two lines of thoughts. Some judgments say that just by terming it as cancellation or declaration, it doesn't make a difference. Even if you term it as declaration, it can very well proceed just like a cancellation suit, because from what I understand, these two suits it's basically semantics.
No, the difference would be that in a cancellation, there is a direction to the registrar to actually cancel those deeds. Whereas in a declaration, you may not need that because it's only a right that you may have. So a declaration would, in that sense, be an in rem judgment, whereas cancellation would be in personam. And like you rightly said, court fee, of course, there is major implications. So that is why.
Yeah, court fee implication is there, but even in a declaration suit, if I make the sub registrar as defendant number 2, if I make the sub registrar as defendant number 2 and ask for that declaration to be, kind of complied by that sub registrar, because a lot of people try and save the court fee. I believe in a cancellation suit you have to pay ad valorem, right?
Yes.
That's correct, but on that, I think subject to correction. But I think recently Justice Nariman has only reiterated the law on this, that the difference between declaration and cancellation, which is to be filed, depends on whether the person seeking a cancellation is a party, executant, or witness to that document or not. So all of that will then come in. So
that will be a very useful judgment to read, Jay. If you have the citation, can you please send it?
I can just tell you in a minute, and I'll send it also.
That will be very useful. Thank you. So I think we've covered the judgment well. Now, quickly, can we talk about some of the major amendments which have taken place and the implication of the same? I don't know. Anyone who is aware of it, Bharat?
See, if you go by the amendment, first is in the section 10, which is the major, wherein may has been replaced with shall. Right? Then they have inserted section 14. Because now the new section 10 is subject to section 14.
Right.
Wherein they have inserted that the following contracts cannot be specifically enforced. And they have given the category of A, B, C, D, and then they have inserted 14A also.
Right.
So basically, now the criteria of those contracts which can't be enforced has been increased from earlier 3 to now A, B, C, D, and certain more restrictions in 14A. I think that's think section. Sorry. So I'm saying, according to me, the major amendment, which according to me is when in section 10 they have substituted shall instead of may, and then there are certain limitations which have been inserted in section 14.
Right, and I think one of the things which remain common is the fact, and this is can be said to be the golden rule, that when the contract is determinable, specific performance cannot be granted. So that is something which remains common, and I think that is a good thumb rule for everyone to keep, that when a contract can be terminated and the consequence of that termination can be sued by way of damages by the plaintiff, then in those cases, there is no specific performance which can be granted, and this is a change which has been retained in the amended act as well. So on that note, I think we can conclude our session today. We've had a fruitful session. Jay, thanks for joining. Please join for more sessions. You've made some really good friends, and Bharat, brilliant points here. Thank you. Thanks for all the.
I'll share the compilation of judgments for the specific performance which we are doing right now. The matter.
Yeah, sure. Madhvi, you want to come in?
No, thank you, guys. I mean, I think it was a brilliant session. I think we should probably have another one on the implications of the amended act. Maybe once a couple of judgments are out, we can do a session on it.
Yeah, we can do it then, for sure. That sounds good. All right. So have a good evening. Unless anyone else wants to come in, let's say bye-bye. Okay.
Thank you so much, Roshan, for the session. Thank you.
Bye, Roshan. Take care.
Bye,
Bye, everyone. Thanks. Good evening.